Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters, and welcome to our raw reaction review for Sinners. Yes, the Ryan Coogler directed vampire. I guess you would call this Prohibition era kind of horror drama. I guess
Yeah,
is the best way to put it. It's got a lot of things in it, and I think that is part of the brilliance because this is a movie that, when we talk about like horror movies that get recognized by like the Oscars or something like that, you know what I mean? Where it's like you have movies that transcend just one particular genre. I very much feel like Sinners does that in spades here. This is a very big, epic movie, and it feels that way from frame one to the final few frames of the credits, I should say.
certainly. There are films when we're dealing with the horror genre, we want that horror feel to it. And usually that's what they double down on. And that's what we're kind of critiquing. But you look at Sinners, and this is such, like you said, a big film where the scope here is so wide that, we'll probably talk about in the review that you forget that you're watching a horror film because as you're just so engrossed in the foundation that Ryan Coogler's setting and really setting the tone for what we're going to see, an hour and a half in, it just feels like it takes its time. It really develops great characters. And I know we're spoiling a lot already, but this film, it just seems so big that you can't just seclude it to the horror genre. Yes, there's a lot of great horror stuff in here, but it just doesn't hang its hat on horror alone.
Yeah, and again, I circle back to why that makes this such a unique experience because you have a director like Ryan Coogler, who, in my opinion, and I believe Luke would share this opinion with me, has not made a bad movie. I think everything that this guy has done, including Wakanda Forever, which I can say, not my favorite Marvel movie, but with all the circumstances surrounding that film, with the unfortunate passing of Chadwick Boseman, it's still kind of mind-blowing that he was able to pull out something that was extremely emotional, very cathartic. It feels like, instead of taking the route that was probably planned out to expand the character, we had to detour a bit and we told a more personal story. And I think that's where Ryan Coogler is really hanging his hat in a lot of ways when it comes to his filmography. And Sinners, I think, is the biggest showing of that, because not only is this not based off of a true event like Fruitvale Station, not based of IPs like Black Panther and Creed, this is straight from the man's noggin himself. He wrote this, he directed it, everything, and it's just dripping through every seam with passion and energy and what he finds important about these topics he's tackling.
Certainly. You can really see that his creative stamp is on this, written and directed by Ryan Coogler, and he's all over this film. There, you use the word emotion, and that's really what I want to dive into opening up this review, is the amount of emotion in this film. We talk about a lot of horror films that are maybe a little hollow, where it's like, hey, it had some great gore, it had some great scenes, but the characters we never really connected with. From scene one, you are absolutely connected to each and every character in this. We take our time, we open up these characters, we learn their backstories, and we really feel like an actual connection, like you're part of this whole group, and you're so invested in here as to what is going on. It's such a unique time period. Ryan Coogler set that up to, when we look at vampire flicks, it's like, maybe a harder sell just because we've seen so many different stories, but Sinners brings something so unique to the table. And I think one of the big reasons is that character development, is the emotion that we do bring in here. There's a scene in here that has nothing to do with any sort of death, anything like that. And it is just kind of, it's based around music. And I found myself getting oddly emotional. Nothing has even happened yet, but the way it's presented and just the voice that shines through, my gosh, I didn't actually cry in the theater, but I could feel myself getting there, and it was totally unexpected at that point. And there are scenes in here where we are really dialing into a lot of different emotions, and that's why this film works when we do get to the horror elements here.
100%. I mean, yeah, there's a sequence that you're referencing here that I even said, and I do want to mention this just because I think that it's going to be something that I know will be a point of controversy. We're going to have dipshits online who are going to be saying like, "Oh, it's all like, social messaging and it's woke and all this stuff." But it's like that sequence that you're referring to, which is truly music based. At first when it starts happening, I'm like, "Oh, this is kind of odd. I don't know. This feels like maybe you're overstepping a little bit. Maybe you're hitting the nail too hard on the head here, Ryan." And I never felt that in one of his movies. If anything, I feel like all of his movies pretty much weren't necessarily safe, but they never pushed things this far. And as the scene continues, and as they call back to a very, very important message that is given at the very top of this movie, it all starts to make sense. And when it concludes with just seeing kind of, I guess I can say, the introduction to some of our villains of the film, it is captivating. It is so unique. It's such an interesting, different, and fresh way to really play on vampire lore of these ageless beings who are very much attracted to things like power and voodoo and energy and spirituality. It's like it's so cool to see how Ryan was able to take all of these messages and weave them in to a very naturally feeling vampire story.
Yeah, and that's where the social messaging throughout this, I mean, is very evident. You're going to see it, and Ryan Coogler meshes it in so well. Like you said at the beginning of that scene, I was like, I don't know exactly where this is going, and it did feel out of place. But just a few seconds in, when we start the camera work, the way we're seeing these characters, it really just felt like, oh my gosh, you can, Ryan Coogler, you can do anything. Take my hand, I will follow you anywhere. At that point. And I was already invested in. I thought maybe that was going to be a point where it's like, this might be a strike on the film, but he weaves it in so perfectly. And there is this social messaging throughout the film, and it never feels out of place. It feels like, okay, the time period's perfect, the characters are perfect, and that social messaging is prime for what we're seeing in this film. And I think that's what's going to set Sinners apart from a lot of vampire flicks out there, because yes, we have that vampire element, but I can't say that this is just a straight vampire flick, because there is so much going on here. There's so much great character work, and that social messaging that always shines through is perfectly done in this film. There is so much to unpack in this film, because this isn't just your run-of-the-mill horror flick. This is something that was very thorough, and honestly, when we look at most anticipated of the year, this was one that was at the top of my list. So I was so hesitant going this one, even though I have so much faith in Ryan Coogler. I was like, other than like Abigail last year, which is a completely different vibe, I was like, I don't really know how we're going to tackle a vampire flick in a unique way, but absolutely did it.
Yeah, and I truly think the last vampire, like when we talked about it outside of the theater, we talked for a good minute. Just a little bit of that conversation talked about vampire movies and just like, the ones that really stick out to us as being iconic. And, you and I share a love for our favorite vampire movie being Near Dark. And I can say without a shadow of a doubt, after waiting, another like 8 to 10 hours after the screening, I truly do think this is going to be up there for me upon rewatch viewings. This is something I'm excited to see again, because I really do think that they took the vampire story and they actually gave it some legs. This is the first time since probably Midnight Mass that I have felt like vampires have something fresh and unique to bring. And that's something that's wild to say after having something like Nosferatu, which, was an epic. It was certainly something cool. But again, if you go back to our review, my major concern with that movie, or I guess criticism, was, we're playing it very safe and to the points of the Dracula story that it's based off of, which it's supposed to, I know. But this is, again, that energy, that freshness that I was hoping to see on the big screen again with vampires. And this movie does it in spades. It does the horror so well because it doesn't rely on crappy jump scares. It's like every jump scare has a threat. Every like build up, every piece of tension is so expertly crafted. And you can tell that Ryan Coogler is just, he is in his, like, if not the start of, then I would say the very much the peak of his power and abilities here as a filmmaker when it comes to crossing all these different genres in one story.
Yes, and you mentioned the word tension in that. I'll say never have I went into a horror film. It certainly this year, I don't think last year at all, where I went into a horror film and I did not want to get to the horror because I loved the characters so much and I did not want them to have to go through.
I said to you, I completely forgot that this was a vampire movie. At like the 40-minute mark, I was like, "Oh my god, yes, that's right. We have the whole vampire thing to deal with. Like, it's
Yeah,
so good."
and because they wait to introduce that element, I think, at the exact right time, because we are really laying that groundwork. And sometimes films just dive too quickly into the horror elements, which is great for depending on what you want to offer. Sinners is a completely different animal than what we see in a lot of films because we're really based on that storytelling. But when we get to those horror elements to it, and it's not all at once. This is a slow burn, so be aware of that. I think if you've seen a Ryan Coogler film, some of them are rather slow burn. So be aware of that. But once we get into the like vampire element to it, it's not all in your face all at once. So we kind of introduce the element, and then we go back to our characters, and that idea of this looming threat. I'll tell you, it was in my head throughout the rest of the film as soon as we introduced that, because it's like, okay, when's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? And you build such a love for these characters that it was like, man, I could just pass on the horror element and let's just kind of watch them all have a good time, because it is such a strong connection with these characters. But once we finally get to that horror element, I'll tell you, the hair on the back of my neck was standing up as we were building to that very first interaction, because what's going to be happening. And I love the tension that they bring throughout the interactions with our main characters, and then this looming threat somewhere else kind of waiting in the wings, I guess you would say.
Agreed. And I think it's really smart how that threat is introduced, and then how that threat is kind of utilized, because yeah, it takes its time in a very unnatural way. There's a sequence where you think everything is going to start popping off like it normally in any other vampire story, or kind of story set up like this with any threat. You would think, okay, this is where things are going to start to get hairy, and then it doesn't, and it pulls back even more, and it takes its time again, and then it's just like, it's so strange. And I love that we have these. Normally this would bother me a lot because I'm not a big musical guy, and I'm not saying this is a musical, but like there's all these breaks happening throughout the movie where it's like we spend 2 or 3 minutes with just the music and making that a character. And it's this beautiful combination of score from the actual like orchestral, like developed score for the film, and these old classic songs from ages ago that people are singing or belting out. And it's like they're kind of building that in all at once. And when they finally cross over, I don't know if you caught this, but when the music and the score finally fully cross over and they become one and the same, that's the moment when things start to go off the chain. And it's so expertly crafted. I mean, you can really tell this has to have been an idea that's been on Ryan Coogler's mind for ages, because like there's just way too much care and attention to detail throughout all of this. And I can appreciate him for having the balls to say, I'm just going to take my time. You know what? If we're going to have a 2-minute scene here where people just sing this old Irish limerick to one of our characters, that's what's going to happen. And you're just going to have to put up with it and trust me. And I got to say that's ballsy as hell.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where, Ryan, take my hand, I will follow you anywhere, because it worked so well. There, even the elements of, there's not a lot of comedy in here, but when they use comedy in here, it drives the story and it works so well. There's kind of this, as you're talking about music, this fun little comedic element where they're singing a song, and it kind of right before everything pops off, and then you come, and it's hilarious, but then you come back to that a little bit later where you're kind of talking about this Irish music playing, where it's like completely like different element in terms of by the same characters, but the situation's completely changed. It's more terrifying than anything because of what is going on. So, I think those elements were just done so perfectly. I think my only criticism really for this film was that this is such a slow burn, which I absolutely enjoyed. I think it was so well done. I did not have an issue with that. But then we kind of, when we get into the horror elements, it all kind of happens at once. And I was kind of hoping, we could digest it a little bit just because it picks up so quickly. And, me and you had a discussion on that. And it was like, hey, I absolutely think it's intentional from Ryan Coogler. It was just something for me that did not necessarily work 100% from what I had been seeing, because I was having so much fun with what this slow burn was. And then once we start packing that punch and we kind of bombard you with a little bit of stuff, I was like, okay, this is just, it felt like we put our foot on the gas, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm 100% ready for this one.
Agreed. I really sat on that when we talked about it after the theater, and I thought about that criticism and that point. And I do think I completely get where you're coming from with it, because yeah, I think like there is a moment where a gear shift has to happen, and it can be a tad jarring with just, again, how much like time we spent with it. And I know the moment, I can't say it because of spoilers, but I think I know the exact moment you're talking about. And it does kind of feel like, okay, now we just kind of skipped forward a little bit. So I'll give it that's the only point where it feels a little wonky, but I think they recover really well, because we do get some very emotional scenes and a very satisfying climax that I think is just really understated. Because right when you think we've seen the climax, we've seen everything, this whole other set piece starts. It's I've seen people say with tweets and stuff, this movie has the Return of the King effect. And it very much does. It does something very strange with an after credit scene where make sure you stay for the credits, is all I'm saying, because there's like another 10-minute scene that really is the bookend of this movie. You know what I mean? It's almost like the epilogue of the entire story. And it's really well done, and I don't want anybody to miss it. There were people who unfortunately walked out of our screening who don't know that's there now, and it's like, oh no, what are you doing? But it's really, really well done. And I do want to, before we get to scores, highlight some of the cast, but I'll give you your say there, and then we'll jump into that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, definitely stay for until it's all said and done. There are so many people that got up and left, and there's just such a fun scene afterward. That you really get to see this interesting interaction, and this is such a cathartic experience. And I know you were gonna highlight some of the cast. That's what I was gonna jump in, just because of performance wise. I think maybe a minor critique was the villain didn't seem villainous enough, just because of the story that was there. But we spend so much time with Michael B. Jordan in those characters, and what a performance from Michael B. Jordan playing two different characters here, really feeling different. And the
like
interaction,
separate people,
and the interaction seems so organic. It doesn't seem out of place or just like, okay, it's one actor playing two characters. It feels like he's playing two separate characters, but he's not doing them in such an exaggerated way that it feels like he's trying too much. It's just like there are these differences that are subtle, and that's where I think those performances excel the best, because it's like he knows how to actually present a human being rather than a character, and both of the characters that he's playing feel like human beings and not characters. And that's where it's like when you're along for this ride, you just get lost in it because you're in those personalities. You're really just loving those interactions. So, Michael B. Jordan, absolutely a highlight here, but there are so many great in terms of casting here.
This video is sponsored by our good friends over at Abracadabra NYC, your one-stop shop for all your horror needs and necessities. By following our link in the description, you can see all that they have to offer, from horror collectibles, costumes, accessories, magic masks, and so much more. And if you find yourself in the New York area, please stop by their physical location. They have 3 floors of everything you see in the store, and a unique, memorable experience to go along with it. So whether you're looking for something creepy, cutesy, or just super cool, they've got you covered at Abracadabra NYC. Yeah, I mean, this entire cast is really strong. There's a couple of high points I want to point out, but yeah, I cannot go without at least mentioning that as another small criticism for the film, is just that the villain is set up. Don't get me wrong. He has his motivations. Yeah. He's there. Are they as deep in comparison, like Luke said, to the other characters? No, they're not really. And it doesn't make him less effective, but it does make him a kind of just overall, I would say, not inconsequential, but he just feels like he's not this big piece to everything that could be going on with this world. And I don't know if he ever really was supposed to be. I think it's more
It feels like he's more facilitating events and
yes,
causing those interactions rather than being like the big bad that, usually we see in a lot of vampire flicks.
I will say, yeah, he doesn't feel like he's like, oh, I am a Nosferatu, or I am like a descendant of Dracula, or I'm like this big. He doesn't feel like that. He just feels like a dude who's a vampire who is almost this chaotic spirit just going around throughout the Louisiana and just like turning people and just trying to get from situation to situation. And it's good. It's a good performance. I mean, he has his moments where he's
Oh
very
yeah.
creepy, very cool. But I just think, yeah, in comparison, it's like we just don't get nearly as much with him as we do with other characters. And those characters, again, like Michael B. Jordan, excellent. It's truly flawless at some points towards the middle and end of this movie when he's playing these two characters where you will forget that this is two people. There's a very key specific scene that I just had to snap myself out of for a moment and realize what was actually happening, and I'm like, holy shit. But really, for me, I think the two ultimate standouts here, and I got to give my girl Haley Steinfeld, excellent, loved her in this. Very very creepy at times, but introduction of Miles Cotton as Sammy Moore. This is a hell of a performance with a hell of a voice. Oh my god, the bassiness to this dude's voice. He is so like interesting. I really am excited to see what he does next with this. But I mean, Delroy Lindo as
Yes.
Delta Slim. I love Delroy Lindo. He was in that what was that? The Five Bloods from a few years ago.
Oh
The
yeah. Yep.
one of those ones. And I know he's had a career as like a character actor for a long, long time, but like, God, this is like on that level, in my opinion, of a role for Delroy Lindo, where it's like he is given so much and he gets to express so much. He's given so many big scenes to just talk about like what he's experienced and what the music that he makes and everything means to him and means to people, and not just people of color, but like everybody who takes it in and experiences it. And it's really, I think, kind of in a way, those two are the entire antithesis, heart and soul of this film.
Yes, because the idea of music is so integrated and weaved throughout this film. And Delroy Lindo, I was so excited to see him pop up on screen. And one of his introduction lines to the Michael B. Jordan, one of Michael B. Jordan's characters for me, it gave me such a great chuckle just because you understand the relationship and the kinship that they have. And I love his interactions as Delta Slim with Sammy, because it is kind of this new and old and kind of, this guiding light. And I'll say, what a performance. I was so excited. When we go to casting, this is absolutely complete casting to a T. There's so much thought put into this, just like it is with the writing, with the tension, with the emotion here. This is such a truly unique vampire story, if you just want to call it a vampire story, but there's so much here to really unpack and just really dig deep. Sinners is something that's so unique and so different that you have to go out and see it. A couple minor critiques, nothing that really kills the film at all. So, while I had those couple critiques, this film is just so head and shoulders above a lot of other vampire flicks that we've seen in the past 20, 30 years that this one for me is easily a must see.
I'm gonna follow up with you. This is a must see. I mean, this is truly one of those movies that I think I will be excited to revisit once, twice a year, maybe, because of just how much fun and how much I love these characters. And I mean, this is not something that sets you up by any means for a franchise. This is kind of a one and done story, but I'd love to see more takes like this from Ryan Coogler, maybe even just in this era, this 1932 era South, and just see what he can do with it. Because I mean, there's so many details and so many things they go over with these characters. There's moments that are hinted towards that I want to see what that was like, especially for Michael B. Jordan's character or characters. So yeah, must see for me on this one, guys. This is we just had Marshmallow, which I gave a must see for just hitting all of the points when it comes to like a camp kind of sci-fi slasher that I like. And this is, again, just another example of a movie that takes horror and elevates it and brings it something fresh and different, and is not afraid to say, hey, we're going to give you something similar here that you're used to, but we're going to look at it from different lenses, and we're going to take it, and we're not only going to pay respects, but we're going to show you what you can do with this material and how viable it still is. And that's what they do here. And that's what I love about it. I mean, again, Jenny Penn, Marshmallow, and now this. I mean, so far the early half of this year is going really well, and I'm excited to see what else we have in store. But I would not be surprised if Sinners winds up in my top 3 of the year. I'm very excited. I'm planning to see this again. It's truly, I think, Ryan Coogler's best film, and I time will tell, but I think this is his masterpiece right now.
It's such an exciting film, certainly. I think Fruitvale Station still edges out for me just a little bit, just because it was my introduction and I had such a great experience with that film. This one, Sinners, oh my gosh, what a strong installment. This one, I know it's going to be in my top 10, easily my top 5. Like you said, could be in my top 3. So I know we're going to be discussing this one throughout the rest of the year. I know we got a lot of strong releases still to come. So maybe we'll be doing a little bit of a report card here in the next few months in terms of what horror looks like and how it's been thus far. So this one, it's an undertaking. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes, something like that.
Yeah,
so
it's a little long.
But it was a breeze for me, to be honest. I love the element, the foundation that was built. So definitely check this one out this weekend if you have the time. You're not going to be disappointed.
Not at all. And I mean, I know we're not alone here with the high praise of this film. It seems like even people out of the horror space are loving this, and that's so exciting. Again, I know there are going to be people who are going to bash this, and it's going to frustrate me. So yeah, if you want to, go ahead, rip me up in the comments. I won't respond to you, or I'll try not to. But no, I definitely I know there's going to be a lot of love for this, and I hope so. And I think this is something that will definitely be popping up on people's radars as time goes on. But yeah, guys, that's going to wrap us up here for our review of Sinners. Thank you for sitting down with us. We got a lot of great stuff up on the channel and lots more to come. But until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the hard shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna slash your ass. 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 Splattercast, gonna slash your ass.